Photography is a situation where you meet the everyday, and it is something that most of us ignore. On returning to Greece, I noticed that Greece was changing quite rapidly at the end of the 60s, the beginning of the 70s. It was my idea at that time that I was going to somehow document the changes or the life that existed that I knew was going to change. My book at that time, which was rather naive in 1976, is The Greece That Is Passing. It was rather naive because I had a body of work which must have been around 40 to 50 rolls of film, which I thought was an enormous number of films. The images here are from that. It was that you could still see a cart with horse underneath the Parthenon, or a street photographer that was taking photographs of a soldier who would send his photographs to his love or to his family, or the buildings that were torn down, and here there's a clear influence by Henri. This photograph, my wife, because we were together, insists that she took the picture with my camera and not me. We have fought over this very much because it was one of the best pictures in the book. Another body, because at that time we got a house up in the mountains close to Albania, and the landscape and the people were very commonly celebrating various times in places under the woods next to a river, and I did a series this way. You will see that this influenced me in doing some later work. The magic moments sometimes come, and you're lucky if you catch it, and then sometimes you go back to the photograph and you notice you sensed that at that moment, but you didn't completely register that there is the villager, the priest, the policeman, and the bourgeois. What happened though, I realized that the nature and the forest and the trees were something that enveloped the human scale. And the isolation of the figures dancing under this huge oak, that life goes on and we are a very, very small part of it. The other series at this time that I began to follow in the villages of the Epirus was that on certain saint days, people gather and eat, drink, and dance. What you will see here is I'm beginning to play with the idea of movement in the image. This is a photograph that existed in the last photograph in the book, The Greece That Is Passing, which gave me the idea of doing this project. It was that I saw that you have a camera on a tripod, and when you're photographing and you use a slightly slow shutter speed, any movement blurs. We know that. And I photographed much more of the dance, where people were at certain moments ecstatic, and sometimes I would find these biblical figures, but at the same time I would notice that I had a cross. Or where the village crazy, let's say, would be isolated for a moment from everybody else. This body of work is called panegyria. In Greek, it's two words. Pan is everything, and gyros, is circular. It means everything is moving in circles. And of course, there are comments of social nature where the two beautiful girls, one black, one white, is being looked at by all the men. Or where the young married couple, in ecstasy are dancing with each other. The exhibit traveled quite far. It was all over Europe. It went to Mexico, it went to Japan, it went to America. It was the first body of work that I did that I became known as a photographer. But as human beings, we're in passing. And this body of work with the idea of motion and the idea of blur and the idea of the dance made me think many times in literature and in art, the dance, the circle of dance, the circle of death. The stones stay, we go. And then this work, I had become, in the meantime, I had a agency that represented the most famous photographic agencies, and we represented them in Greece for publication in magazines, newspapers, and advertising. At that time, I was found by, to me, one, if not the greatest, certainly one of the few greatest photographers today, Joseph Kudelka. And I started photographing places where I'm sure these things occur also in Bulgaria. Events, dances at the beginning of the year before the waters are blessed by the priests. And it led me slowly into deciding that it's time for me to try to work with what in your country also is, I thought initially the Greek Orthodox Church, but I soon realized that it didn't interest me what the church did, etc., but it interested me how people had this need, as they had the need to dance and to have music, they had the need to believe in something. And so I started traveling to various places, mostly in Greece, but some in Turkey, some in Albania, in order to photograph faith, but around the church events, outside, sometimes even in a church. Most of the ones you're looking at now are in Tinos, which is the island where the 15th of August of the Dormition of the Virgin is celebrated. And images such as this showed also how different the previous generation and the young generation are. These are also from the book, I break up the units with trees, which we will see further, a body of work. I've done a body of work also on the fire walkers, which you also have here, and I did it at the time, of course, it didn't become, the last time I went, which was about 10 years ago, there were Japanese cameras there, and you can't really work when you have all of these people like that. I've always tried to photograph people and places where there is authenticity. One of the magic moments that occurred, there are others I suppose, but this one was a gypsy mother that was going to baptize her child, and I had 3 or 4 photographs there I had taken, and I realized I saw something that could happen, but I had to be ready, and it did happen. The child, which is a Christ child basically, is looking straight into her mother, and he raises his hand in the same gesture that the saint in the back has his hand as blessing. And of course there's an additional quite modern effect, which I saw later, like I did in other photographs, that there's a mirror back there behind their heads. So here you have reality, events occurring, mirroring something else. Life is full of that. We just have to be sensitive, ready, and technically, not technique, but spiritually ready to get it. And now I come to a body of work that I did in Albania in 1990-91. I went there because I saw that it was a society that was oppressed, much more than any other that I knew, and like when I photographed Greece that is passing, I thought things were going to change fast there, so I wanted to be there to see some things. Going there, I went to photograph black and white. I'm basically a black and white photographer. But as I went there, I realized that the country had color. Because of the poverty, because of the desperate situation, the Albanians would paint bright colors on walls and houses, etc., in many places. And so I started shooting color because also some agency at that time, I think it was Sigma, wanted the work. I never really worked as a reporter. I have done work. I have been in Bulgaria 3-4 times working for Le Monde, Libération, and others. But it's not my game. So I went there and I started photographing street photography, and happened also to be there at a time where changes were taking place, very serious changes. But what also struck me is that people were carrying bread in the streets. You saw everywhere that there was bread that was being carried. The reason was that that was the major food, the major staple. And the old lady carrying a piece of bread next to this decrepit and horrible piece of military truck, I thought, to me, was symbolic of the situation. Many Albanians at that time were doing anything they could to flee the country. The mafia was passing them across to Italy, and I got on a boat and went to Italy with this group of people that were searching for a better life. And they got on trains in Brindisi to take them to Germany, and they got on there without even their clothes sometimes, with nothing with them, to start a new life. And you can see the gratefulness that they're showing that they're being taken. While the people back at home are searching lists from the embassies to see if their people made it, or trying to find out where this person was. There was distrust, obviously. This was the first Jewish family that was allowed to leave Albania. I happened to be there at that time. Stores with nothing in them, and if you had cigarettes, you put them all over to make it look like there is. There were protests. And so they were new to this. So what they would do is cut out letters and try to put them on a panneau, on cloth. And I was photographing them, and the funny thing is the magic moment occurred. He was trying to catch the democracy from falling. So, yeah. Yes, the protest became more and more. I was there, and the people for the first time were out in the streets expressing themselves and trying to convince, that the Democratic Party was the one that they wanted. Of course, what they found out later was something of a different story also, but this is the optimism. To me, these people are real. And I was in a couple of amazing situations such as this. If you see this as a big photograph, you will see every single face. It's enormous. And in the back, the factories continuing to pollute. It was ridiculous what they maintained, that they were actually producing tractors, etc. It was all a false. And these two guys came in, another magic moment, let me say. They came inside, and I was here. By the way, this is a huge write-up about the elections, what they're supposed to do. Most of these people couldn't read. But these two guys came in. I looked at it and I said, whoop. So I moved around, and they saw me trying to take a picture. And they started posing, and I said, you know, sometimes by your body movements, you make the other person do things. And so I moved over here, and they realized, and they moved over there. And I stood a little bit, I waited a little bit, because they didn't know what, you know, they're going to be photographed, so they didn't know what to do. And then I saw, you know, besides 2 and 2, and red, it's also young and old. You know? And mustache and mustache. So it was wonderful. I really loved this, and the problem is on these sort of things, I was doing so much here that I should have taken their name, etc., but I was so busy, taken their name and an address, etc., and sent them the photograph. But here, there were many journalists that were there at that time for the elections. And at that time, we photographers were shooting slides. This is Ektachrome. And because many of them were working with agencies, as soon as the elections finished, they had to rush to get on the plane, to take their films, to get them developed, to get them out to the press, especially the French press. I said, nah, things still gonna be interesting here. So I stayed. And then I heard from a French woman that up in the north, Shkodra, which is famous for being very fiery people, much more so, there were protests, etc., and it wasn't going so well. So I went up there, and it was night to begin with, and I tried to photograph, and the police did not like that. So they were very threatening to me, and what happened was some young people surrounded me and slowly moved me out of the crowd and took me to a house to stay there the night. And luckily, they did that because 3 people were killed that night. This is a young man that is coming to his friend's funeral. And these are the relatives that were waiting at the wake. And I was the only photographer, and they embraced me, and I photographed the following. And this was one of the people, young, again, very noble, beautiful face, that was killed, and his fiancée was the woman that you see there with her mother behind her. And the whole village came out to pay their respects, and I had been following all the events, and at this point I wanted to take an angle to show also this crowd, which is the whole village, and I couldn't get the perspective, so again the young man took me on their shoulder in order to get this perspective. And then this river of humanity, the whole town came out to take the 3 to their resting place. During the night and in the morning, they stormed the police station, and they burnt the police station and burnt all the dossier personale that existed for each person. This is a historical photograph, in a way. The dossiers. And from the building, these papers flying down and life continuing. Thank you. Wow. If you have any questions, photographic and otherwise, I would be happy to answer. I'm very happy, by the way, to be here. I don't know if you know, but I had a grandmother and a grandfather and my father who were born in Bulgaria, in Plovdiv, and then exchanged to Greece after the First World War. So I'm a little bit Bulgarian. Any photographers want to ask any photographic questions? Don't ask me technical questions, what lens I used, etc. Those are, you know. Yes?
First of all, I want to say that your work is absolutely stunning. And
Thank
even
you.
though the size wasn't that big,
Yeah.
they were absolutely breathtaking. And I wanted to ask, you mentioned quite a lot of times literature, art, music.
Yeah.
Except for the subject itself, where do you get your inspiration from?
Ooh, good question. Many places. I always tell photographers, I've told you, that in effect, if you're going to try to be a serious photographer, don't be just a photographer. In the sense that you will be a better photographer if you read literature, if you listen to music, if you see theater, if you do many other things that actually come in and create a more complete person. You will see more things. I think also the seeing is wonderful in photography. When I was teaching, I was trying to tell people, it doesn't matter if you don't take great photographs. It doesn't matter almost even if you take good photographs for a long time. But eventually you should, otherwise, you know. What you should do is your eyes will start seeing lots of things that you didn't see before. Because as you try to take a photograph, you start noticing much more. To be honest with you, sometimes I don't take any photographs and I'm almost as happy because I'm seeing things. And you see things because the experience of photographing has opened your eye and opened your mind. Inspiration is a difficult thing. It comes because you have known a fantastic person. That gives you many times things, because you have loved somebody, because you have seen situations where you realize what it is to be a human being, where you have helped somebody, where the people that I showed you, the harsh, unshaven man that was the Albanian, there are people that would say, oh yeah, he's, you know, he's a peasant, he's etc. He was a beautiful, beautiful person. So the inspiration comes from connection. It comes when you are attached, you know, and you can be attached to many, many things. So the inspiration will come when you feel that, and then the difficulty comes how to move into the subject that you're working. Also, it's very important not to try to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and so on and so forth. It's very important to say, okay, I'm going to try to work either in this, it doesn't have to be a theme. It could be the Papa down here. I walked this afternoon on another day. It's fascinating. People are standing there all the time. People are waiting things, but people are holding things. They create all sorts of compositions. And, you know, the inspiration can be right there. Of course, you can stand there for half an hour and nothing interesting can happen. And then you can get frustrated. Cartier-Bresson has said many wise things. He was, he was a very educated and sometimes snotty person. I knew him. But the thing is that he said, you know, sometimes I'm there to photograph, and nothing happens. And then nothing happens. Leave it, you know. But be ready so that if something happens, you're there. And the point is to see it. Lots of things happen all the time. We just don't see it. So to answer your inspiration, it's my children, my wife, the women I have loved, the students that I have had who loved me, I don't know, the cognacs I have drank, seriously, you know. And all of those things really, you see, photography is such an all-encompassing thing, and it is very beautiful. And it gives you a way. I started, remember I said Cartier-Bresson impressed me because he created his world. I hope from what you've seen here, I dare say, it's a little bit, I don't know if it's pretentious or not, that I'm trying to create my world.